Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to week number 5, recorded lecture number 15. Well, this is the last lecture in which we shall be discussing principles of effective communication, that is 7 C's. Today we will be completing all these basic principles, and then inshallah from next week we will move on to the next topic. Let's move to the fifth principle, that is clarity, right? So far we have talked about 4 principles. The first principle we talked about was completeness, which focused on how to make our message complete. Second, it was conciseness, where we described how to make your message short without compromising other C's. Third was consideration, that included due attitude and respect for your reader. Fourth was concreteness, that focused on to be specific. And now today we are discussing this fifth principle, that is clarity, right? So clarity means getting the message across your receiver is clarity, right? If your message is understood by your receiver, that means your message has clarity. Now within clarity, the first principle that we have, it's choose precise, concrete and familiar words, right? But please do keep one thing in mind, that this list of familiar words, and at least familiar words, this varies according to the level of your receiver. Like if your receivers have good language skills, they have command on language, the language of communication. For example, in our case it is English, then their familiar word list will be lengthier than those who have less command on English language, that is in our case. Now one way we can attain this 5A is that we use more familiar words instead of less familiar words. For example, these few words given, like after is more familiar word, whereas subsequent is less familiar word. Similarly, pay is more familiar word and remuneration is less familiar word. Invoice is more familiar word and the statement of payment is less familiar word. Though if we see all these 3 words that have been placed in less familiar words are more formal than the words that have been placed under more familiar words heading, right? So being formal and informal is another point that we are not discussing under this clarity, but what we say that your audience is more likely to know these words that we have under familiar word list. And we should also keep in mind, as I have already said, that this being more familiar or less familiar will also vary according to the language competence level of your audience, right? Some words that may be less familiar for one audience can be more familiar for another audience, right? Okay, so then unfamiliar, after our pursual of, now we are having an example of this unfamiliar. After our pursual of pertinent data, the conclusion is that a lucrative market exists for the subject property. Now this is an unfamiliar, like unfamiliar words have been used in this sentence, whereas the same can be rewritten with more familiar words like this one. The data we studied show that your property is profitable and in high demand. So the first one sentence has unfamiliar pattern and unfamiliar vocabulary as compared to the second one, which has more familiar vocabulary. Okay, now moving forward towards 5b, which focuses on construct effective sentences and paragraph, right? Let's begin with the length, right? In business communication, short sentences are preferred. Now again, using such thing like short sentences is a bit difficult. Like now short sentences does not mean using only simple sentences, right? Well, we would say a sentence of around 20 words would also be a short sentence. Like it depends on the writer's language competence, and of course it also depends on the reader's language competence for whom the message is being written. But writing unnecessarily complex sentences for communication purposes usually create difficulties for the receiver, and hence receiver is unable to understand what the sender or the writer or the speaker means, and ultimately receiver is unable to understand. And if the receiver is unable to understand, the very communication process fails, because communication process becomes successful only when your receiver gets the message that the sender or you as a sender wanted to communicate. So short sentences relatively are preferred, but you can use compound sentences where two simple sentences are put together with a conjunction. But you should avoid complex sentences in communication. Once again, this is in communication. Complex sentences are very common in literature, and sometimes they may even be valued. But our discussion is language for business communication, not for literature or history or any other subject. Then next it is there should be unity in your writing, right? Unity means that the two ideas that you put together, they should have some link with one another. For example, this sentence, I like gym and the Eiffel Tower is in Paris. Well, there is disconnect, there is no unity, there is no link between I like gym discusses something different and Eiffel Tower is in Paris is something different. So two different ideas have been put together and made one compound sentence, which usually will be confusing for the reader. Reader will get confused that in the first sentence you talk about a gym, somebody, a person, that you talk about his likeness, and immediately in the same sentence, which is a compound one, you go to the Eiffel Tower, which do not have any relation with one and another. They do not have any relation with each other. So unity would say that when you are going to make a compound sentence, or when you are going to link sentences, or when you are going to make paragraphs, then there should be unity in the ideas that you cover under that sentence, or even under that paragraph. Now, third point is coherence. Well, in a coherent sentence, the words are correctly arranged so that the ideas clearly express the intended meaning. We can have a look at this example. Like this, the first one is unclear statement. His report was about managers broken down by age and gender. Now, this can have multiple meanings. Well, it seems that those managers were broken down because of their age, or they were broken down because of their gender. So it can have more than one meaning, it can have more than one interpretation, whereas it can be made clearer by writing this way. His report focused on age and gender of the managers. Now, this is best clear that the report that he has written that comprises of age and gender of the managers working for some organizations. Now, another way to write a clear sentence can be that his report about managers focused on, then you can include all those factors that the report has focused on. So, our writing should be clear, because clear writing will help the receiver understand the message better as compared to unclear writing, which usually is misleading. So, true courtesy involves being aware not only of the perspective of others but also their feelings, right? When you talk about courtesy, it's not only knowing your receiver's perspective, that is important, but even you go one step ahead, you also try to know, well, are their feelings going to be hurt if I use these particular words, or if I frame my sentence this way, right? So, a true courtesy would be that in addition to their perspective, you also respect their feelings, and you do not do anything, or you do not write anything, or your writing style does not even hurt your receiver's feelings. So, courtesy stems from you attitude, as we have already discussed, but that is the initial level, that is the first level of you attitude, that you, through your words, you give respect to your receiver. But that is the first step, that is not the last step. Courtesy is not just use of polite words like please and thank you, it rather grows out of respect and concern for others. Even if you continue using these words, please do it, thank you very much, but actually, the actual courtesy would be the concern that you have for others, the benefit that you give to others, right? The respect that you actually show towards others, right? So that would be actual courtesy. Well, the next is be sincerely tactful, thoughtful, and appreciative. Like we have the this example where tactless and blunt way of saying is a stupid letter, I can't understand any of it. Now, if you write this sentence to your subordinate or to somebody who is intended reader for that letter or email or memo, this is going to be very blunt and very harsh, right? Whereas it can be made more tactful. It can be made more courteous by being more tactful, and that says the letter requires more clarity instead of saying a stupid letter and using, you know, I would call them substandard words in your writing and in your speech. Okay, so the 6b says use expressions that show respect, right? The expressions that you use in your writing, they should show respect to your receiver. And of course, avoid irritating expressions, right? Irritating expressions such as contrary to your inference and you failed to or you have to. I have quite often come across this sentence, you have to do it. A student saying it to the teacher. It's not because they are disrespectful, it is because they do not understand or they do not know that this expression, you know, that you have to do it, that's sort of an order, and we always are not in a position to give an order. So these are some of the uh, expressions that are irritating, and you can see more expressions, irritating expressions, in Murphy's Effective Business Communication book. Well, 6c says choose non discriminatory expressions. So, choose non discriminatory expressions, those expressions that do not discriminate. For example, we will be focusing here on gender discrimination. Like this word, the first word, chairman, right? Now, this is discriminatory and it includes that head of the department is only a male, whereas head of the department can also be a female. So, a non discriminatory expression would be chairperson. Chairperson can be male and chairperson can also be a female, whereas chairman clearly says that it is a male. So, avoid such discriminatory uh, expressions. Like usually, fresh graduates or novice professionals, when they write their job letter, their salutation usually is Dear Sir. Again, that refers to that the person or the human resource manager is always a male only. Well, a human resource manager can also be a female, right? Like this course, that is a freshman English course, again, gives the impression as if the course is only meant for the male, right? Or we say, well, man-made handicraft. Actually, that is handmade handicraft or handmade biscuits or anything like that. Okay, so now let us move towards the last principle of effective communication, or to be more specific, effective writing. And within this, the first comparison that we are going to have is between formal and informal language, or formal and informal vocabulary, right? So these formal, let us begin with this first column first, that this formal writing is often associated with scholarly writings such as doctoral or master's dissertations, scholarly articles, legal documents, or high profile agreements, etc. Whereas informal writing is more characteristic of business writing. In business writing, short, well known, and conversational words are more frequent. Well, this is though this is bit general about business writing. Even in business writing, there can be formal and informal. For example, your memo that you write to a colleague is informal writing in a business setting, and a project progress report is a formal document. So it's not always, that all business writing is going to be informal, right? But usually, the internal communication usually that you have everyday communication is more informal. So let's see these words, few examples, like participate is a formal word and join is an informal word. Similarly, endeavor is a formal word and try is an informal word. Likewise, deem is a formal word and think or believe is an informal word. Utilize is, according to Murphy, this list is from Murphy's book. So, according to Murphy, utilize is a formal word, whereas use is an informal word. Similarly, interrogate is a formal word and question is an informal word. Though, if we see interrogate and question as terms, they are two different terms that serve two different purposes. Like interrogation usually is carried out in matters where somebody is to be probed for a specific issue or problem, whereas question can be a simple any type of question, everyday question, or an inquiry related question or anything, right? So these are some of the words that Murphy has suggested as formal and informal words, right? But once again, there is no such thing that you cannot use formal words at workplace. Yes, for everyday routine messages, routine emails, routine memos, usually informal language is more frequent, as it's stated by most of the field experts and most of the writers as well, right? Whereas even in organization, like writing reports and writing manuals requires formal language. So being professional, you should be considering both of them, and according to situation then you should decide whether you should be using informal in this particular context or situation, or you shall go for formal vocabulary in that particular context. Okay, now let us discuss the lighter side. This Eden C. Stickle humorous poem on how people formalize language, right? This is just a little humor, a little lighter side, and through his poem, Eden has shown how people make this informal language, how they turn it into a formal language. So this serves both purposes. It will, one way, it will help you to differentiate between informal, or rather less formal and formal language, and on the other side it will also show you it has some humor in it, so it will also bit lighten you up. Like he begins, colleges aren't schools, they are learning institutions. Like school is bit familiar and institution is bit formal, right? Problems do not have answers, they have viable solution. Like this viable solution is a formal term that is used for answers, that is informal term. People do not spend money, they are reallocate resources. I think it should be they reallocate resources. So this reallocate resources is being used as humorously being used for spending money. Newsmen don't use tipsters, they rely on informed sources. So this informed sources has been made a formalized term for tipsters, right? Which is an informal word. Okay, now moving forward with this humorous poem. Speakers don't make speeches, they give oral presentations. Though oral presentations are different from speeches, but as I have already said, that this is a humorous poem, so a speech, according to Eden, is informal word, and oral presentation is a formal term used for that. Bosses don't set quotas, they just indicate objectives. So quotas and objective. Workers do not take orders, though they implement directives. So taking order, according to Eden, is an informal word. They are informal words, and implementing directives are formal words. Okay, so let's move forward. Machinery can't break down. Break down is an informal word. When machinery stops working, or it has developed some sort of a fault. So Eden says machinery can't break down, but components can malfunction. So breakdown and malfunction, malfunction is a bit more formal as compared to breakdown, which is less formal or even informal. A court does not command, it just issues an injunction. So command and injunction, informal and less formal and more formal. Programs do not have failures, they have qualified success. So like this qualified success, because every program, even if it fails, so they say, well, it's not a failure, but actually it's a success that you have learned out of that. So Eden puts it in this humorous way, this way, that programs do not have failures, they have qualified success. And the last couplet, and jargon doesn't hurt you. Jargons are field related terms, like there can be different jargons for civil engineers, there can be different jargons for uh, mechanical engineers, different jargons for like petroleum engineers, different jargons for business graduates, and different jargons for graduates from other fields. So jargons are those field specific terminologies. They say, Eden says, and jargon does not hurt you, it just constantly distresses you. So actually distressing, is also like hurting, but since Eden has I would say very successfully helped us understand that how hurt is an informal or less formal word, whereas distress is a formal word. So if you just focus on these three components of this poem, it helps you to great extent understand the difference between less formal and formal words, right? And that has been done in lighter and humorous way, you know, which usually is easy to understand. So next 7b says check accuracy of figures, facts and words. Well, verify your statistical data. If you have a statistical data in your letter or report or memo, so verify it. Double check your totals, because even a small mistake can just adding 1 0 can mean thousands. It can change from hundreds to thousands, and so on. Avoid guessing at laws that have an impact on you, the sender and your message receiver. So if there are any laws that are going to influence the sender or the receiver, so don't guess, be sure. You can go to the code book, you can open it, and you can even quote it. It's recommended that you quote it. Have someone else read your message if the topic involves data. Of course, if that is you cannot do it with every message. Well, when we use this term message in business communication, that means that is a comprehensive term that is used for email, for letter, for memo, and for all other types of communication. So this message in communication would mean that all that communication that you have at your workplace, within the organization or outside the organization. Determine whether effect has changes over time. It's possible that the fact might slightly change over time because of many factors. Then you should also focus on words that confuse. For example, while deciding on whether you should use anxious or eager, apparently they look similar to many, but in fact they have different meaning. Like anxious implies worry, that somebody is anxious means somebody is worried about something. Whereas if somebody is eager, that means somebody is desirous to do something. For example, if we say he is anxious, it means he is anxious about his job. It means he is worried about his job, right? And if we say, well, he's eager to join that new job, it means that's a desire, that's a positivity. So we need to understand the context and use the words accordingly. Then we have this accept and accept. Sometimes we do not understand the difference, and we use them at the place of one another on the basis of their sounds, but we should be careful about that. Like accept means receive. He accepted the job offer, that is ACCEPT. And accept means omitting or leaving out. For example, well, I liked everything in that organization except the rude behavior, right? So accept here means other than the rude behavior or leaving the rude behavior. There are many words that confuse. Many of them are there in Murphy's Effective Business Communication, but you can also see other communication sources, even the book that has been shared with you, Gaffey's book, that can also guide you to some extent. So, thank you very much. That's all about effective principles of business communication. Usually, they are required more in written communication, but being professionals, we also have to be careful about our oral communication, right? So take a good care of you. Thank you very much, and inshallah see you in the next live session.